when you discover there's a mismatch between the activities you perform every day at work and your basic, personality and interests. And that's when that happens, that's when burnout occurs, because you're doing things all day or that are in conflict with who you are or who you are becoming as a person.
So I'm very excited about our guest, Dr. Tim Clark. He is an entrepreneur who sold a startup to a NASDAQ entity for a multi-million-dollar transaction in 2000. Next certified trainer, teacher, author, and leads the global personal business model movement. He was editor of Business Model Generation, author of Personal Business Model U, which together sold over 1 million copies in 30 languages. Tim, love how you evolved the business model canvas to a personal version. This has helped my clients and myself take an entrepreneurial approach to our careers. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Donna.
I wanted to get into entrepreneurship because this is something that you focus on a lot. I've got a big mid-senior level professional audience as well. And before I ask you more about you, I wanted to ask, what is the one big thing that makes entrepreneurs great, and how can professionals leverage this in their own careers?
Wow. Well, I wish there was one sort of magic silver bullet that I could say, if you have this, it'll happen for you. But I'd say the one thing I've noticed in all entrepreneurs is that they're willing to work like farm animals. I mean, you have to work really hard. There's no substitute for just really hard work, and so there's no surprise there. It takes a long time to get good at something, and so that's one thing. The other is I think that you have to be very interested in and committed to solving some kind of problem. Usually it's something you've noticed in the workplace. And that kind of commitment is absolutely essential. Just the desire to be successful or make money will never sustain that kind of commitment over time. So those are things that I think are just essential for any professional who wants to be successful in an entrepreneurial way or in a full-time job.
So it sounds like having that great discipline and drive to work really hard.
Yes, I've met many entrepreneurs. I've interviewed a lot more I haven't met, and I've read a lot of the entrepreneurship literature. And really, that's the one common thread that goes through almost everyone's story. And I've never encountered or even read about an entrepreneur who was successful because they were pursuing financial gain. So I think that says a lot right there.
Wow, this is definitely inspiring and something that professionals can leverage into their careers so that they can really excel in them. That's awesome. So growing up, I was always asked by school teachers what I was really passionate about. And there was all these, aptitude tests that we had to do. And I remember how I picked, software engineering was when I watched a movie with Sandra Bullock hacking into, a government system. Looking back, I had no idea what I was passionate about. There was a lot of pressure in terms of, picking a career, and a lot of that pressure came from, if you don't have a passion, you're not really successful. So I wanted to take your basically perspective on that and this approach of choosing a career path.
Well, I think your experience, Nada, with watching this movie of Sandra Bullock doing all these cool things is exactly how a lot of young people get their impression of what work is all about. But they don't have an experiential understanding of work. They don't realize, for example, that, if you're going to be a computer analyst or an IT expert, you're going to be in front of your computer for 7 hours a day doing this. Maybe they see you having lunch and wearing power suits and flirting around the world, but the fact is the experiential understanding of what a profession is something that a lot of young people just don't have yet. So they get their impressions from media or other sources rather than from shadowing or getting some kind of actual experiential understanding of work. I think that's the first problem. The second is that, like you, many of us took aptitude or personality tests that say, oh, well, you're suited for this occupation or that occupation. But I think that's backwards. When young people don't even understand what it means to work, how could they choose what kind of work they want to do? So I think we have it backwards, and I prefer to teach young people what work means. What does work actually mean? And it sounds like a simple question, but it's actually a very deep and important question. Once they understand what work is, then they can start to think much more effectively about it.
So it sounds like what you're recommending is a very experimental approach where you would try things out and figure out what your interests are and just dig deeper into them rather than have this absolutely single answer that you're born with.
Yes, I think people, young people especially, need to understand what work means and what organizations do. Organizations create value for customers, and they need to understand that when they work for an organization, which is most likely what they'll do, is that they are going to be part of creating that value. So what does that mean? It's not just performing a set of activities that are divorced from everything else. They're not just in a silo grinding out work by the hour, but rather they're part of a system and an ecosystem that is creating and delivering value to customers. So that's the first thing to understand. And then the second is, exactly as you said, is to start getting a sense of the things that interest them, and not what they're passionate about. Very few young people have a passion about anything, really. They need to experiment and try things that they're interested in, and then if they get interested in something, to pursue that until their interest either deepens or it slacks off and they can shift direction.
That's great. And, sometimes when people go through their careers into their 30s or 40s, they realize that it's something that they're not very passionate about. And I often hear the term burnout,
Oh yeah.
where they dread waking up in the morning to go to work. Why do you think people get burnt out? And have you been in that situation?
Oh yes, I've burnt out several times. I think though one thing to remember is that we all go through different life stages. What you're interested in at age 22 is going to be very different from what you're interested in or doing at age 40. You might find a partner, you might get married, have kids, buy a house, someone gets sick, you're divorced. There's all these life stage events which have a huge impact on your professional life, your spiritual life, and so we recognize that we are constantly changing, and so that's one cause of burnout. I'd say the most important one, though, is when you discover there's a mismatch between the activities you perform every day at work and your basic personality and interests, and that's when that happens, that's when burnout occurs, because you're doing things all day or that are in conflict with who you are or who you are becoming as a person.
I'm curious to dig, more into your story about burning out and how did you overcome it?
Well, yeah, I guess my big burnout story. I Well, I'd like to say that, when I graduated from college, like my friends who went off to Motorola and Intel and so forth and had this smooth stairway to heaven approach to careers, I wasn't like that at all. I struggled to find my way. And over the years, I finally did, but I found it in entrepreneurship and in starting my own venture. And when I started my venture in 1993, it was a very computer intensive. I was essentially had discovered the internet, and I was very interested in doing multilingual websites and market research and so forth. And I had actually had quite a few, I'd been doing so much writing and computer work up to that time that I was actually having problems with my hands and with what's called cubital tunnel syndrome and repetitive stress. So 20,000 keystrokes a day will have an effect on your hands. And in the midst of this, I went into this new venture, which was even more computer intensive. And I loved it, but as time went on, I became, my physical problems became more and more intense. And also the whole internet bubble, we became caught up into it. And although we weren't an internet startup ourselves, a lot of our customers were. So there was this combination of physical factors and then this market, this incredible market rise and then crash that we went through. And by the end of it, I was burned out. I was physically burned out and spiritually burned out. I'd started this venture and it was successful. I was very lucky, but I really didn't even want to look at a computer for about a year. And so that was a classic burnout for me.
Wow. And going through that, what is your advice for people who are experiencing that burnout?
Well, you've got to stop what's hurting, whatever that might be, and that's what I did. I was very fortunate. I was able to literally take a year off and restore my physical health, and take a really hard look at what I wanted to do. And I realized that I really had enjoyed teaching and writing and doing research and so forth. And so I decided to go into teaching. Um, so I think, one reaction to burnout is that you tend to reject what you were doing before, right? You want to, okay, I'm not gonna do computers anymore, 180 degrees, and get away from that. But that's an overreaction, because whatever you were doing before, there was a reason for that, and there's usually a core there that's a big part of who you are. So I think you have to be a little bit careful about not trying to just throw away what went before. We all hear about the New York advertising agency executive who moves to California to run a bed and breakfast and fails miserably. That's a typical burnout scenario. I've had enough of corporate life. Now I'm going to go live in the country and sip wine with my guests. And that's rarely works out well. So you need to make a change, but you need to hang on to what was essential about your previous life as well.
Yeah, that's really valuable advice. It's like going through an audit of your past experience and taking the parts that worked for you and discarding the ones that didn't serve you, and looking at how everything aligns to your intrinsic motivators.
Well, another thing I'd say is engage a very good career counselor. And I'm a big believer in career coaches and career counselors. This is not something you can do on your own. And so people like you are exactly what people with burnout need. They need to find a trusted other, someone who's professionally interested but emotionally detached from the problems, the challenges that they're facing. And a career counselor is it's well worth investing in a good 10 sessions or more of strong career counseling.
I am very curious about how you came up with the personal business model you. It sounds like it was something that may have transformed, as a result of what your experience. And I'm also curious about how this model helped you evolve your career.
Right. Well, starting in 1993, I was dealing with business models, and I became very interested in the whole concept of business models. And our work involved porting or taking business models into different countries. And so, for example, we created Amazon.com's very first non-English language website in Japanese, and we replicated other models for the Japan market. So I was very interested in business models, and after I sold the company and went into teaching, I started researching this formally because I wanted to teach entrepreneurship. So I was doing a lot of reading about business models, and I encountered the most compelling practical approach to this I found was that of Alex Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur, who are Swiss academics and researchers who came up with the business model canvas. Um, and over a period of 10 years, and it was finally presented in a book called Business Model Generation, which I ended up editing and being a contributing co-author for. So working on that book with Alex and Yves was a really defining experience for me, and I had been using their model in my doctoral research. So I was very, very familiar with it. And while working on that book, it struck me that their model could be applied to individuals. And I tried it on myself, and it was just amazing. I mean, it was literally one of those, seeing the stars, seeing the skyrockets go off in your head, and it was. I thought, wow, this is something that a lot of people could really benefit from. So that's when Business Model U, the concept came together. I guess that was 2009 or so, and I think my experience burning out and selling the company also had a big effect on me, because I realized that I'd worked so hard on this startup for what, 8 years now, and I sold it successfully. But once I had sold it, I realized, well, okay, what is my own model? I realized I had no personal model for what I wanted to do going forward. And that really struck me. And I actually wanted to write a book about entrepreneurship to help people, mainly college students who are not in business disciplines, but rather in English, history, or chemistry, whatever, to as a way of understanding sort of principles of basic entrepreneurship. And that was my original goal. But when I started working with Alex and Yves, that evolved into this personal business model, and now we call it sometimes personal service model concept.
Wow, that's a very inspiring story. I know that I benefited a lot from, using your model in terms of determining my direction. And I always tell my clients that it's really important to have a vision and a strategy to go about it. As much as you want to experiment, you want to also follow some kind of process and be in check in terms of what your goals are and how you want to go about it in the most efficient way.
Yeah, I think we all need a logical structure to work on our careers. But that logical structure has to have containers for emotion as well. And so the what I call the Canvas logic framework gives you both of those things. This is what it is right here, without the labels for the different boxes. But again, it's a way to logically think about your work and what it could be, but also to incorporate the emotion and the spiritual, all the elements of your life, essentially in one visual document.
That's great. Can you tell us a bit more about your certification, the practitioner certification, and who do you think would benefit from it?
Sure. Well, the certified practitioner training is basically helping people experience the business model U method and learn how to teach it to others and to use it in your own professional practice. And of course, you're in the training now, and we're almost complete with it, so you can talk about that elsewhere if you like. But it's I want people to first of all understand it as an end user, and then be able to apply with others. Usually, we have people who are human resource managers, team leaders, a lot of agile coaches, managers who supervise or mentor other employees. Of course, we have career coaches and career counselors, vocational counselors, uh, academics, and quite a few independent consultants, change management uh, specialists, and management consultants as well.
That's great. And I fit in the agile coach category as well. That's something that I used to do when I was a management consultant.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur?
No, I don't. I think most people are not meant to be entrepreneurs. I think it's actually a really bad idea for most people to become entrepreneurs, and I'll tell you why. That is because if we define entrepreneurship as being self-employed, uh, and there's actually been some really good studies about this. There's a great one called the Myths of Entrepreneurship. Is a very robust academic study of self-employed people. And what they found was that over time, self-employed people make less money and are less satisfied with their lives than people who are employed full-time in organizations. And that's a hard truth to face, but I think it really is true. Um, on the other hand, I think everyone should be more entrepreneurial about their careers. And the difference is being entrepreneurial just means uh, recognizing that you are essentially like a startup in the sense that you are in search of a valid model for running your business or running your life. And that model will change over time in step with your own life stage changes, but also in step with the economy, with world events, even with things like fashion. And look what happened with COVID-19. Of course, the world's been turned upside down for hundreds of millions of people, probably billions of people, something that none of us could control. So we've got to be constantly adapting and learning and accepting our failures and learning from them. So that's another thing I probably should have mentioned, that good entrepreneurs are able to take advice from people who know more about something than they do and act on it, or they're able to encounter failure and learn from it and then adapt. So that's really the essence of entrepreneurship, and I think it's pretty clear that we all need to do that regardless of how we work.
So what's next for you?
Well, uh, I really love what I do. I would like to see it adopted widely across the world. We do have a licensing agreement in China. I would like to have similar licensing agreements in all the major, all major languages, really. Um, People need to have this training done in Chinese and Japanese, in Hindi, in German, and so forth. So definitely looking for partners who would like to take that on with me, and I'd love to support them. Another effort we have is it's a UX project. That's YOUX, led by Randy Millard, and that is teaching the business model U methodology in junior high and high schools, and exactly addressing the problem we were talking about earlier, the fact that traditional career education is 50 years out of date here in the United States. And surprisingly, everywhere I go in the world, people say the same thing. Even in places like Germany or the Netherlands, even Denmark, people say, wow, it's out of date here too, which really surprised me. So I would love to see that approach widely adopted in public schools all around the world.
You're doing incredible work, Tim. This is amazing. And thank you so much for giving us your time here today and sharing all your knowledge. I know that a lot of people are going to resonate with what you've shared and learn a lot from this. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Nada. It's great to have you with us.